Hey, and welcome back to my kitchen. Well, today I'm going to be canning stewed tomatoes. So come along with me and let me show you how to can stewed tomatoes. Into this video here, you're going to be getting a recipe for quantity of tomatoes and small quantity of tomatoes. So into this canner here, this canning pot here, it is heating up. I'm just heating these tomatoes up, and I'm going to show you how I get all the peels and the cores out really simple and easy and fast, and it doesn't make it hard when it comes to canning tomatoes. Okay, this is my tomato press, and this is what I use to press the seeds and the cores and the peelings off onto my tomatoes. I don't have to blanch them to get, soften up the skins off of the tomatoes to get the skins off of the tomatoes. I just use this, and this thing right here has been a lifesaver. I love it so much. It's a Weston. I ordered it offline, and what I like to do is cut my tomatoes in quarters and then put them up there. You don't have to. Last year I didn't. It did wonderful, but just to make it easier on me and the piece of equipment here, I just cut them in quarters and put them up there on the top, and then mash it down and spin that handle, and then it just spins around. On this end, I have a bowl, and all the cores, seed, and peelings go into that bowl. And then when I get finished, I can take those to the compost and throw them in the garden or the raised bed. What I like to do is run it through, put it back into this bowl 3 times, and it works wonderful. I don't have hardly any waste. So I got my jars in there heating up. They're going to be warm. This is going to be warm. I got jars sitting there so I can put into my pot to warm them up. I'll be putting my canner onto the stove. It already has 2.5 quarts of water in there, and plus 3 tablespoons of vinegar. I'm going to be using a Presto canning pot for doing this recipe here. In just a minute, I'll be setting the pot of tomatoes right there, so it'll be easy access. I'll be moving my tomato press out of the way. I've got some vegetables there. If I decide to put it into my stewed tomatoes, you can put bell peppers, a variety of peppers into, there's jalapeno peppers in there, into your tomatoes if you like. I have my funnel ready. I have the sugar and the salt ready. I'll be using plain salt. I have my lids and my rings ready. The jars have been washed. The rings and lids have been washed. I have my debubbler ready, and I have my paper towel with vinegar in there to wipe the rims off. So I have this to get my jars out of the pot, and I use, this is like a rubber, like you would pick your pots up, silicone, but I like to use it to put my hot jars on. It also helps catch the water. So like I said, you can put a variety of peppers into your stewed tomatoes and can them with your tomatoes. So you can mix it all up and just put it into your jars, is what I'm saying. But today I'm just going to be stewing tomatoes, so that if I'm making soup or whatever, and I do make soup with peppers and different varieties of peppers, but basically when I do it that way, stewed tomatoes, I'm going to be making spaghetti sauce. But today I just want to stew tomatoes. My mother used to love stewed tomatoes, and she would just take it and open up a jar and put it over some rice. That's what she liked, and that's how she did. She just stewed the tomatoes. So these tomatoes are heating up, and this is where you start putting in all your vegetables. You decide to put a variety of peppers in. This is where you're going to combine all the ingredients into a large saucepan or pot, or like I'm using here, an old water bath canner. So here we have our canning pot, or our old water bath canner. So you're going to use a big pot if you have a large quantity of tomatoes. If you just have a small quantity, say maybe you just want 7 pints or 3 quarts, you're going to need about 24 large tomatoes, or basically 4 quarts that are chopped, peeled, and cored tomatoes. So I've got 15 quarts here, so I'm going to be using a different recipe. Into this recipe with this amount of tomatoes, I'm going to be using 4 tablespoons of sugar and 8 teaspoons of salt. Now, if you only have, say, you only want 7 pints or 3 quarts of tomatoes, and you're going to be using about 24 large tomatoes. In other words, once you get all your core and tomato, the peeling and the seeds out, once you get all that out, then you're going to have about 4 quarts of chopped tomatoes. So today I'm going to be adding my sugar in, which will be 4 tablespoons of sugar and 8 teaspoons of salt. This is also a time where you can add celery to these tomatoes. You can add onions to tomatoes. You can add green peppers. It's really endless what you can add at this point in time. So if you only have 4 quarts of chopped, peeled core tomatoes, say that about 5 times, you're going to need about 1 cup of chopped celery. That's about 1 stalk. And you're going to need about 1/2 cup of chopped onions. That's probably about a half a medium onion. And then you're going to need 1/4 cup of chopped green peppers. That's about 1/4 medium green pepper. And then 1 tablespoon of sugar and 2 teaspoons of salt. And then you're just going to add all this into your pot, and you're going to stir. You're going to heat it up. You're going to cook it. You can put a lid on it, and you're going to cook it for about 10 minutes. But you got to constantly stir this to prevent sticking. So now I'm going to go ahead and add my salt and my sugar. Now I'm going over just a little bit as far as salt and sugar, which is not a problem. My mother used to add more sugar than this, but today, in the past, I have put lemon juice to keep my tomatoes from turning brown with time. But I noticed when I opened the jars of tomatoes, which is not a problem, you're just making soup, I could taste a little bit of lemon juice in there. And probably because I'm doing a whole lot of tomatoes like this, and if you're just using it to make soup, then it's not a problem, you're not going to taste it. Or you can use citric acid and put it into your tomatoes to keep it from turning brown. Now, my mother never did that. I don't even think, back then, at one point in time, they didn't have that. I know my grandmother never did it because they didn't even have, unless you have a lemon tree, and maybe you could afford lemons, or even if they had them at the grocery store, because back then everything was seasonal. If the lemons, or say for example cucumbers, were it's summertime, and springtime maybe, and the cucumbers are coming in, you'll find them at the grocery store. Wintertime you didn't get that. Today everything is shipped in from different countries, and so you can get things like that. But my grandmother never used any citric acid or lemon juice. She just did it this way. She didn't have the onions. She didn't have the peppers in it. She just stewed her tomatoes. She just canned her tomatoes like this. And then when she was going to make soup, she would open up a jar of tomatoes. So on the top of this, we see like it's bubbling up. It's just a film. I forgot what it's called, but it's just because it's heating up, and we're going to skim that off of there. We're not going to put that into our jars. Now, if you were stewing this down for, say, you're going to make salsa, and you got your peppers in there, and whatever you decide to put in there, onions, and, you're making salsa. As this is cooking down, it will make these little bubbles right here, and you will keep skimming it off. So this pot is just heating up. That means the bubbles are rising, and it's putting these little bubbles at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and skim this off. This is not going to hurt anything, even if it gets into your jars. All it's going to do, you might see it, it's not going to make your jars pretty. But I'm sure in the 1800s, they didn't care about that. And surely maybe they skimmed some of it off just like we would. But I'm just saying, it's not going to hurt you. So just little bubbles, little film, I guess you say, little bubbles, little air bubbles. And so we're just going to take and set that aside. So this is where we put our pot on, and this pot is already heating up. Remember to always keep this stir, because especially with this quantity of tomatoes, especially with just tomatoes, it can burn. So it's going to stick to the bottom, it can burn. So just keep it stirred, and of course, and again, as we're stirring, we see those bubbles rising up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it stirred up, make sure it's not sticking to the bottom and burning, and then I'll skim that off. So basically all we're doing, we're not cooking this, we're just getting our tomatoes hot, ready to put into the jars with our hot jars, and then our tomatoes will be hot, and then we will be putting this hot liquid, this hot jars, our stewed tomatoes, into the canner. Okay, our timer is set, and so it's just countdown time for stewing tomatoes. So we got all our ingredients combined into our large pot here, and we got it covered, and we're going to cook it for 10 minutes. We're going to constantly stirring to prevent sticking, and then we're going to either take a ladle, which would be one of these, or you can take a measuring cup. That's usually what I like to use, so I don't have to keep dipping. And then we're going to put it into our jars, the tomatoes into our jars. So we're going to put our hot tomatoes into hot jars, leaving 1-inch headspace. And after that, we're going to debubble. We're going to debubble and get all the air bubbles out. We're going to wipe the lid off with vinegar and water. Make sure there's no tomatoes on top, or salt or sugar or anything like that sitting on the top to keep our tomatoes from not sealing. And then we're going to process. And the process time for pints is 15 minutes, quarts for 20 minutes at 10 pounds of pressure in a pressure canner. I'm going to be using a pressure canner. Some people use, say, like a pot like this, my grandmother's water bath canner. And but I like pressure canning, and actually this recipe is coming out of the Ball's Blue Book. This is an old book. It's got great canning recipes into it, how to can different things, like, for example, squash. Into the modern canning books, you won't find how to can squash. But this is a really good book here. You might be able to find one on Amazon, but I love this book. This is one of the books that I use for canning. Okay, so we've got our canner over here heating up. It's got 2.5 quarts water in it. Sometimes I'll put 2 quarts. Sometimes I'll put 2.5 quarts. And the reason I put 2.5 quarts because I want to make sure that I don't run out of water into my canner. This is a Presto canner pot here. It's got 3 tablespoons of vinegar because I'm on well water, and because the minerals can stick to the jar, make it look cloudy. So I put vinegar in there to break that up, and so it won't be cloudy onto my jars. I also use vinegar into my jars, especially if I'm doing, say, meat. It breaks that grease up and it doesn't stick to the jars. So here we go. We're going to go over here and start canning. So this is a very easy, simple recipe. If you're starting out canning, this will be a recipe for you, or should I say a canning process for you. When I started canning, this is what I started canning, these tomatoes. And we're just going to fill the jar up. We're going to get 1-inch headspace. So this is the 1-inch mark right here. We're going to stop it there. You can stop it a little bit below if you want to, but you definitely want to give that 1-inch headspace. Some people don't debubble. I like to debubble. There's air pockets in there, and I like to get that air out. I always like to use another jar to set my funnel on so it can drip in there. Then we're going to take our vinegar, our paper towel, and we're going to wipe this ring. I always use vinegar. Some people use water. To me, it seems to make the lids in the ring stick better, or the lids. Cut this timer off. Then we're going to get our ring and our lid. Now, Ball says you don't have to heat these up anymore. I do both ways. Depends on what I'm doing. So I'm going to put this on there, and I'm going to be finger tighten it. You're gonna get it to where it stops and finger tight. The old USDA that my grandmother's canning book that came from USDA says firmly tight. So, because every everybody's hand strength is different. You just don't want to sit there and over tighten these jars here because air needs to escape. So now we're going to take this jar here and we're going to set it into our canner. And we'll just continue until our canner is full. Now I'm doing quarts, so if I was doing pints, then I could use one of these. This is what you would set on top of your jars if you was doing pints, and you can get more jars into your canner here. But I believe it's either 7 or 8 quarts, 7 or 8 quarts that can go into a canner like this. I do a lot of pints, but I believe it's 7 or 8 quarts, and that's all you're going to put into your canner. Okay, so we're going to get a hot jar out of our pot here, and we're going to set it right there, and I can see it smoking. And then we're going to get our funnel, and we're just going to fill the jar, and we'll continue this process until we get our canner filled. 1-inch headspace, debubble, wipe our top off here, get our ring and our lid. We're going to finger tight, and then we're going to take it and put it into our canner. Now I will continue filling my jars up and put it in my canner. Since I've got a lot of tomatoes, I'll probably get another canning pot going, a canner going, so I can make this process faster. Now my canner holds 7 quarts. Now we're going to put our lid on. Now this is a Presto. There is a little arrow up under here that helps me to line this canning pot lid. And if you have the arrow over on this side, you try to put it on, it usually won't go on. It doesn't go on for me. And now I'm going to turn my burner up to high. This is where we're building pressure. This is where you need to know your PSI. Whether it's 10 pounds of pressure or 15 pounds of pressure. I'm on the southeast coast of North Carolina, and we will be going up under 10 pounds of pressure. So you can look into your manual and find out what your PSI is. That's very important. So now we're just going to wait. It's not going to take very long. Steam is going to eventually come out of here. We want this canner to vent. We're going to get the steam to come out, vent for 10 minutes. So that's what we're doing now. We're just going to wait for the steam to start rolling out of here, and then we'll put our weight on, and then we will be on our way to canning. Okay, our canner is venting here. See a good amount of steam coming out, and we'll reach over here. I got another canner going here. I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes, and I'm going to let this canner vent for 10 minutes. While we're waiting on the other canner to be venting, I've got this All-American canner going. As you tell, it's different than the Presto canner. So it doesn't have a gasket into it. The Presto has a gasket in it. You will have to replace them every so often. The All-American doesn't. I've got 2 quarts of water in there. I've got 3 tablespoons of vinegar, and I've got it set on high. I'm heating this water up so I can go ahead and get my tomatoes in there. So our timers went off. We put our weight on. We've got our burner sitting on high. We're going to watch this very carefully. Let this go up to 10 pounds of pressure. When it reaches 10 pounds of pressure, then we're going to start our canning process time. The process time for pints is 15 minutes, for quarts for 20 minutes at 10 pounds of pressure. In the meantime, we're getting this canner going, this All-American canner going. And how you tighten these up is that once you raise this up, and what I always do is go around, look around, and make sure that this is even. You got the lid, you got the canning pot, and make sure it's all even around spacing, because if you don't, if it's kind of crooked, steam's going to come out and you're not going to be able to keep your PSI right. So when I put my lid on, I'm going to tighten these up. You're going to go diagonal. You're going to go this one, tightening, this one, this one, this one, this one. And all you do is turn it and tighten it. I always go back through and make sure that these are tightened. And we've got our burner set up on high. And now we're just waiting for pressure to build up in this one. It's going to build up, steam's going to come out, and then we're going to set our timer again for 10 minutes and let it vent for 10 minutes. Same process, just a different canner. Okay, this canner here has reached its PSI, its pressure. I need to set my timer. I'm going to be very careful here. These pots are very hot. I'm going to set it for 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, we'll cut our burner off. Our canning process has ended, and then the PSI, the pressure will go down. We'll just cut it off, leave the canner sitting here, and let it go down to 0. Let it sit there 5 or 10 minutes. Still going to watch this. This is where it's going to go up or down. So the canner's going to sit there for 5 or 10 minutes. The AC's rolling. So 5, 10, 15, it's not going to matter after that. What you're trying to do is get the pressure down. You don't want to take this weight off. If you hear pressure coming out of here, it'll go shh. If you hear that, keep the weight on until you hear no rattling in here, the jar's rattling, no bubbling, no pressure coming out of here. And then after that, that's when you're going to, once that takes care of that, you know, all that pressure goes out, then you can take your lid off. So we're going to watch this. It's at 10 pounds of pressure. There's a little line there that I can see is not just a little line, it's a marker that shows where the 10 pounds of pressure is at. On this canner here, I've learned that I have to cut the temperature up and down to get it regulated. Every canner is different. You got to get to know your canner. So this one right here, I'll watch it. Sometimes even to the canning process, it'll start to climb. So I have to really watch the temperature on this. Canning is really simple. It's nothing to be intimidated by it. It's just learning. You're just learning your canner, learning your stove, following the recipe, the canning recipe on how to process the product that you're putting into your jars. I'm trying to keep it at 10 pounds of pressure. If it goes to 11, I'm not concerned with it because there's times I can cut it down to 4. No matter what I do, it's not going to drop down from 11 pounds of pressure. As I always say, the canner knows what it's doing. So if it stays at 11 pounds of pressure, I'm okay with that. My experience of canning, sometimes a product, for whatever reason, takes 11 pounds of pressure. Maybe it's the atmosphere. Maybe something's going on into the atmosphere. Who knows? So this canner is building pressure. I can start see the steam. I can feel the steam. The thing about on the stove here, how they make stoves, not like my grandmother's day. Her stove, I can still see it. It was wider. It was wider. It was where you can take, put your pots on there and have enough room around any size pot that you want to put on there. And so it was a little bit bigger. Today you got one burner that these canning pots can cover. So back here on this back burner, I'll have to watch this. I've canned on it before like this, but I can't push it too far back because of my knob back here, because this canner gets very super hot. The All-American takes a different weight. It has 5, 10, and 15 here. You can put it on 5, you can put it on 10, you can put it on 15, depending onto your area. That's why you need to look at your manual and see what your weight will be. Whether you put it on 5, 10, or 15. We're going to put it on 10 pounds of pressure. Okay, I can see the steam. I can feel the steam coming out. It's been bending for a little bit. I'm going to put it on 10 pounds of pressure. And now the pressure will start to build here. We'll watch it, and then we'll keep this canner also on 10 pounds of pressure. Once it reaches 10 pounds of pressure, then we'll cut the burner down and we'll start our canning process. On the other canner, we've got 12 minutes and 37 seconds left. And it's on 10 pounds of pressure. Perfect. Okay, this canner has reached 10 pounds of pressure. This canner right here is fixing to end in 52 seconds. So we're going to go ahead and start the timer for this canner for 20 minutes. Pints, 15 minutes. Quarts, 20 minutes. I also want to add, because I'm basically having both timers coming off and one going on, I got to cut my burner down at the back. This timer does operate a little bit different. I mean, this canner does operate a little bit differently. So I'll just keep it at 10 pounds of pressure. Same process, just a different canner. Okay, our timer's off. We're going off. We're going to shut it off. And we're going to cut this burner off. This canner will sit right here until it goes down to 0. And then I'm going to leave it sitting here for definitely 5 or 10 minutes. And then I'll make sure it's not bubbling inside. I don't hear anything. And then I'll gradually lift this weight off right here. See if steam is pressure's coming out. If not, then I'll take the weight off. And I'll let this canner sit there for 5 or 10 minutes. And then I'll open it up. And then I'll let the jar still sit into this canner for about 5 or 10 minutes because the AC is rolling. And then I'll take it out of the canner. This canner right here, I got the temperature set at 7 at this moment. This canner right here really keeps the pressure more steady than the Presto. I don't have to watch it as closely as I do with the Presto. The Presto has a tendency to flex a lot, and with its temperature, with its PSI, and so with this canner right here, if it hits its 10 pounds of pressure, after 10 minutes, it pretty much keeps it. I'm not as worried as I am with the Presto. So the timer has been set for the All-American for canning process. This All-American, I had to cut the burner down. It was sitting on 7. I had to turn it down to 6. This is all of the tomatoes that we had left on that big old pot of tomatoes. We'll end up with 14 quarts and 7 pints. The pints will be processed at 15 minutes and of course the quarts at 20 minutes. But that's amazing. This will go into the refrigerator and I'll just pour it into something I'm cooking and it'll be awesome. This canner right here, the little thing has popped down. It's reached down to 0. I can still hear it bubbling in there. So it's just going to sit there. This canner right here, the timer is fixing to go off. So it'll be the same process. Both canners will be sitting there. The PSI on this will drop down to 0. I'm just going to let these canners sit here and cool down. Okay, the timer has went off on this canner right here, so I'm going to cut the burner off. This canner right here has just reached down to 0. This little thing has popped down. So both these canners will just sit here and cool down. I can hear in this canner right here that it's still bubbling inside, so it's definitely got to sit there. And now after this, we'll just let them cool down and we'll be ready to take the jars out. Okay, we're going to take this weight off. There's no steam coming out. We're going to open it up. Being very careful with 2 canners on the stove. It's not like my grandma's stove. And we're going to lift it up and take it away from our face. And then we're going to let those jars sit there and cool off some more. This canner right here is dropping. It's half its pressure. Okay, we're going to get our jars out. So don't be shocked on how it looks. Okay, so that's what it looks like when you take it out of the canner. It's going to settle down. And this is what it looks like once it's cooled off and the rings are off. It's going to be dated, and that's what it looks like. Very pretty. When they come out of the canner, they kind of look like that. It's a lot of water into it. Tomatoes will settle down and it'll be all normal. Now, these tomatoes did not have any citrus acid or lemon juice. Lemon juice has a tendency to hold the color into the jars as time goes on. Here is a jar that has not been processed yet. Very beautiful. But if you want less water into your tomatoes, My experience is that I would just cook them down some more. But you can, I mean, just cook what you're doing. You're going to have it still into your pot, and you're just going to have it on low. You're going to keep stirring it so it won't stick to the bottom. And what you're doing, you're cooking some of that water out. That's what I do when I make salsa. I might have a big pot of tomatoes. By the time I get it cooked down, I get those tomatoes where it's thickened up, then I've got a half a pot of tomatoes because there's a lot of water in there. Okay, we have passed the 24-hour mark as far as these jars here. Most of the rings are off of these jars. They usually get to a place they're easy to come off. Now this has a little bit of sugar in it, so it has the tendency to stick just a little bit. If that's the case, just run it over hot water. But this is the time to take these rings off. Now, you see the separation. This is the water, this is the tomatoes. And what I do, sometimes they'll settle. They'll just go ahead and settle right on down. But just mixing them up, and they'll be just like that, as pretty as anything. If I have one that, I'm going to show it to you in just a second. Well, this would be a good, it fell. I was going to say, sometimes the tomatoes get stuck up there. What I do is I turn them over. You know, you don't want to leave it like that. That liquid gets down onto the tomatoes. And down there into the tomatoes. The liquid gets down there into the tomatoes, and it just kind of, you know, soaks it up and it loosens it up. But that's all you got to do. Let's see if I can find one. This is a good one. So the tomatoes are way up here. It's just from the process. You see the separation here, the water in the tomatoes. We're going to just move it around. Sometimes you'll have the bubbles will go out of it. Sometimes you'll have the tomatoes stay at the top. I turn it upside down. You can hold it for a little bit. I can tell it's thicker down here than it is up here. Sometimes I'll have my ring on it. If it's like that, I'll just set it down for a little bit, let that juice soak into those tomatoes, and then usually it'll come right on off, and it just did. Not come right on off, but come right on down, and it will come off. It'll come off to the lid up here. So this is canning stewed tomatoes, very easy and effectively, but this is what it looks like when they come out. So don't be alarmed if you see this. After your 24-hour mark, which this has been really longer than 24 hours, then you just take these jars and shake them up a little bit, move them around, and it'll settle right on down. My next step here is to take these to the sink, because I did use some sugar in these, and then I'm going to wash these lids off the whole jar off real good. If you're using salt, you might get away with just a rag and water, hot water, warm water, and just clean your jars up, and then you're ready, just ready to store them up. Here's a ring right here I didn't get off. You see, just really easy. It's just time to get them off. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you on to the next video. Guys, I hope that you got something out of this canning session today. Stewed tomatoes. Great for casseroles, soups, stews, you name it. It's a good winter additive to all your cooking needs. So having stewed tomatoes onto your canning shelf is a must-have. So I'll see you on to the next video.